Hello, everyone, and welcome to the VERITY webinar. Today, we'll be exploring an important question. Do we trust science? And how can we build an ecosystem of trust in a changing world? So I'm Agata Gurzawska, and I'm the coordinator of this EU-funded VERITY project. And I'm truly delighted to be here today with my VERITY colleagues from Trilateral, EUREC, F6S, UCLan Cyprus, ZSI, and UNIVA. In this session, I'll be sharing some reflections on the challenges of trust in science, and I also will walk you through recommendations on how we can foster a stronger ecosystem of trust going forward. So science helps us understand the world around us and tackle big challenges such as global health, climate change, sustainability, and inequalities. But as we know, scientific development on its own is not enough. Building trust means connecting science with societal values, fundamental rights, and the needs of people, but also ensuring that the benefits of science are shared fairly. So, not too long ago, we all witnessed the doubts and debates around the COVID-19 vaccines. And it's not just vaccines. We see also the same kind of pushbacks when it comes to climate change, wind farms, artificial intelligence, but also 5G networks. And moments like this make us stop and wonder, are we moving in a post-science society? Well, not necessarily. So despite the headlines we often see about skepticism towards science and scientific advancements, the bigger picture looks different. Both European and global surveys show that overall, people still place a relatively high level of trust in science and scientists. However, the fact that people in general trust science does not mean that they follow science-based recommendations on a specific issue. And science-based recommendations are grounded in systematic empirical evidence collected through rigorous research methods. And this typically involves peer-reviewed studies, data analysis, and replicable experiments. In contrast, individual expert-based recommendations often rely on personal experience, intuition, or professional judgment without always being backed by a broader body of evidence. So if science-based recommendations are grounded in evidence, why are we sometimes hesitant to follow them? It is a complicated question. People's decisions are influenced by many different factors, not just the science itself, but also personal experiences, social and economic circumstances, cultural values, and even historical memory. But from our VERITY findings, a few key points stand out. First, there's the nature of science itself. Science is complex and it often carries uncertainty. And that can be hard to reconcile with human need for clarity and certainty in everyday life. Second, the research environment around us is changing. It's not just universities doing research anymore. We have new actors and new forms of research collaboration, from public-private partnerships to large international research consortia, from companies with their own research and development to grassroots citizen science initiatives. They all shape the way knowledge is produced and shared. Social media platforms add yet another layer of influence on how people perceive science. Third challenge, science is becoming more entangled with politics and the economy. That brings opportunities, but it also raises concerns about politicization and privatization of science and knowledge, which can, of course, also erode public trust. And finally, there is the broader ecosystem of trust. So let's explore the challenges that this evolving ecosystem of trust presents. As research is changing and new actors enter the scene, trust is shifting from institutional trust to distributed trust. So trust is moving into the hands of the many and the traditional ecosystem of trust is broadening. To address this challenge of distributed trust, with the VERITY project, we introduce the concept of the ecosystem of trust in science. We define this ecosystem as a dynamic space where societal trust in science is formed, shaped, negotiated, and influenced. And within this ecosystem, we identified what we call stewards of trust, actors who are the gatekeepers of trust in science. Some are traditional, like universities, research funders, and ethics committees, and others are newer, the tech industry, social media influencers, civil society groups, community leaders, and even us, citizens themselves. Each plays a role, whether through formal mandate or simply the influence and power they hold in society. For the last 3 years, the VERITY project has been investigating the ecosystem of trust in science, the roles of stewards of trust, and methods and tools for enhancing trust in science, and all in the effort to develop recommendations for strengthening trust in science. Within VERITY, we conducted rigorous theoretical and empirical research and actively engaged with more than 500 stakeholders to co-develop and validate recommendations for fostering trust in science. And today, we're extremely excited to share with you our results, the VERITY protocol of recommendations for fostering trust in science. So the VERITY protocol of recommendations is a critical resource for operationalizing trust-building mechanisms across the ecosystem of trust in science. It provides a robust framework for stewards of trust to cultivate trust in science, emphasizing actionable strategies, systematic reforms, and collaboration opportunities. This protocol is organized in 6 overarching strategies for fostering trust in science, 8 roles of stewards of trust in the ecosystem, and in total, we have 100 actionable recommendations. The protocol is available to everyone, open access on Zenodo, VERITY website, Embassy of Good Science, as well as European Citizen Science Platform. So let's start exploring the recommendations with 6 overarching strategies that guide actions to foster trust in science. First strategy, building trustworthy science, which is about promoting alignment with high standards of scientific excellence, ethics and research integrity, and delivery of tangible societal benefits, collaborative practices, and open access to scientific knowledge. It's also about improving transparency on funding sources and enhancing independent research validation. Second strategy, engaging the public in scientific processes, which involves institutionalizing mechanisms for meaningful citizen involvement as co-creators in research, from design to implementation. It's also about promoting mutual understanding between researchers and society through inclusivity, fair recognition, and public contributions, and shared ownership of scientific progress. Next strategy is educating and raising awareness, which should focus on integrating digital literacy and critical thinking skills into formal education to address scientific complexity, uncertainty, and falsifiability, counter mis and disinformation, reduce echo chambers, and promote exposure to credible information. What is interesting here is that we also advocate for extending science education and awareness raising beyond citizens to all actors, including policymakers and the media. Next strategy is science communication, which is about promoting science communication that goes beyond transmitting facts to foster dialogue, relationships, and critical thinking. It's also about ensuring accessible, inclusive, and crisis-ready science communication strategies that counter mis and disinformation and foster public dialogue. It's also about reforming academic incentives to reward science communication and invest in communication infrastructure and training. The fifth strategy is building supportive policy frameworks that involves designing science-informed policies that prioritize benefit sharing, transparency, inclusivity, and accountability. Also about avoiding selective use of science to support short-term political agendas. And finally, aligning science with public interests while safeguarding scientific freedom. For example, for ensuring that research funding prioritizes impartiality, scientific freedom, and public interest over private or commercial interests. Last but not least is collaboration, which focuses on creating mechanisms for interdisciplinary, international, and multi-stakeholder collaboration between stewards of trust. And also focuses on fostering a coordinated, innovative, and impactful science ecosystem, which builds on trust and mutual benefits. In addition to strategies, we also identified 8 key roles that stewards of trust play in fostering trust in science and implementing 6 overarching strategies that I just explained. So the stewards of trust include science producers, science educators, science communicators, science policymakers, science funders, science implementers, science oversight and protection actors, science society facilitators. And stakeholders are interdependent in their efforts to support public trust in science. Each stakeholder group plays multiple roles and holds various responsibilities in fostering trust in science. However, collaboration between all stewards of trust is essential for fostering trust in science. That's why we also explored the interconnections and collaboration mechanisms among them. So you may wonder, how can I use Verity recommendations? Well, first of all, be a steward of trust. Explore strategy-specific or role-specific recommendations. Share the recommendations with your network. Use insights in your or your organization's policies, practices, communications, or outreach strategies. And of course, recommend the document to your peers, colleagues, networks, and other interested parties. And to help you do that, we actually developed 3 supportive mechanisms. First of all, an interactive online tool that turns the Verity protocol into a practical, dynamic tool available online that tailors recommendations to who you are and what you want to achieve. Think of it as a navigation map of trust in science, guiding every stakeholder to their role in building a trustworthy ecosystem. So let us show you how it works in practice. The second supportive tool is a scenario building training for effective implementation of recommendations. And it's a flexible resource for exploring the practical implementation of recommendations in your individual or your organization's context. So you can follow the VERITY scenario building training step by step, specifically on the Embassy of Good Science platform. We also provide you with links so you can see how it works in practice. We provide you with materials for exploring the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, so you are more informed about how to implement those recommendations and what kind of impact those recommendations would have in your practice. Now we can move to the third tool, which is the I Am a Steward of Trust toolkit. And the toolkit is designed to help you in the role of a steward of trust, to actively support, disseminate, and promote the mission of VERITY, including sharing your efforts in fostering trust in science on your social media. So in an easy way, you can download the background, you can adapt it to your needs and post it on your LinkedIn. Exactly, we can see it in the screen right now. So I encourage you to connect with us through our website and social media and learn more about trust in science through our research and results. We'll now move to the question and answer session. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat and my colleagues will help facilitate the discussion.
Thank you so much, Agata. Perhaps I can bring back one slide so attendees still have access to our social media accounts. For those that are curious to watch the full video and also the final project video, I would suggest, Sarah, perhaps you can post it also in the chat. Yes?
It is posted, yeah, in the chat. I hope that you all can see it.
I'm not sure if the participants actually do see the chat, but for them, the question and answer session is open. So we will be addressing any questions that you may have at this stage. There is one comment coming from Irina Tiron. If I'm not mistaken, basically this is VERITY project officer, right? I do have a question now coming from Daniel Pizzolato. I hope I pronounce it correct. So the question is, how can VERITY guidelines position themselves among the variety and multiple guidelines produced by different EU-funded projects?
Thank you so much, Daniel, for this question. It is absolutely an important question because we are all aware how many different guidelines and resources have been developed by EU-funded projects, which are an incredible resource. And I think what is important from the VERITY perspective is that we did not want to reinvent the wheel, but we actually built on those guidelines and projects that have been previously developed. We actually conducted a literature review, but also we reviewed all those different guidelines that came from projects that focus around trust in science, through research ethics, research integrity, responsible research innovation, open science, and so forth and so on. And we also spoke with people working in those projects through interviews, but we also built a very strong network, broader cluster that was led by colleagues from EUREC to really, again, not to reinvent the wheel, but really how we can work together on strengthening our voice. So through the guidelines that we developed in VERITY, we also try to strengthen the voice of other EU-funded projects. What we've also done is that actually on our website, we showcase those different EU-funded projects and initiatives that foster trust in science through different strategies for fostering trust in science, from those strategies that we identified in VERITY. There is more than 70 initiatives and EU-funded projects showcased on our website, and everyone who's interested in exploring specific strategy, for instance, building supportive policy frameworks, or building trustworthy science or collaboration, can go, they can filter and look for those initiatives. So this is something that we also wanted to do to reinforce the voice of this very broad and wonderful community who truly acts together also as trust builders. I think what is also interesting is that we're actually meeting just after this webinar with various EU-funded projects to continue our collaboration. And soon, in the end of September, we're also joining forces with several EU-funded projects, including our sister projects, Janus and Poiesis, also on trust in science, and Embassy of Good Science. And we're having a joint session at the NRO event, where we'll be discussing the trust in science, the recommendations, and how to make sure that the recommendations are not just a theoretical framework, but actually being implemented by the stewards of trust. So I hope this answers the question, Daniel. Fantastic. Great. What I would suggest is, of course, that this webinar is a very brief snapshot of our core results. But over the last 3 years, we developed different reports that go deeper into the reasons for trust and mistrust in science, the question of who people trust and how trust is built, and of course, also the recommendations. So we truly encourage you to explore those resources that are free and open to anyone. We also truly would love you to try applying those recommendations in your practice. You can use the scenario building training to do that. And hopefully we also hear from you. How does it work for you? Because it's truly the community of stewards of trust that foster trust in science. So I believe that if we have no further questions, we can probably slowly close the webinar. But honestly, on the behalf of the entire Verity team, I truly wanted to thank you for joining us today and for your contributions. And the recording and slides will be shared with you, and we look forward to hearing how you take on the role of stewards of trust and put the recommendations into practice. I will give the floor back to Violeta to close this webinar then.
We have one more question from Daniel. Do you have plans for implementing Verity guidelines at institutional level?
Yes, so I think that that's exactly what also what we were saying through the scenario building training for stewards of trust, and we encourage everyone to test those recommendations and implement them at the institutional level. Of course, as the partners of Verity, we intend to implement those recommendations in our own practices, but as I said, the guidelines only live through the community, and that's why we developed those tools that help you implement the recommendations in practice, whether in your institutions, in your organizations, but also your individual practice. And apologies, Daniel, if I haven't seen this question earlier.
Yeah, he says thanks, meaning that the reply was good enough. And then we have a new one. I got here late, so you may have said this already, but still there is a question. How applicable may this be for the us? Perhaps for us. It's coming from Zach Pruett. Zach, can we ask you to at least identify the role that you are playing? Is it for the USA? He means coming from another continent, obviously. Okay.
Absolutely. I think that what is unique about the recommendations is that trust in science is a global challenge in changing research environment where research and innovation are not just limited to Europe. As we mentioned before, indeed, science is becoming global. It's a collaborative efforts, and obviously science is also very fragile. The trust is very fragile in the current political development. So I think that it's very interesting how the recommendations can be explored by different stewards of trust, depending on their role. So what we're showing is that you can explore the recommendations either from the perspective of the strategy. So if you're interested in either building trustworthy science or exploring the collaboration, but also looking from the perspective of your individual institution or the role that you play. So from the perspective of, for instance, research funders or science developers or science implementers, you can explore especially the online tool. You can look at your role, the recommendations that are viable for you. Also from the US perspective, they're pretty universal, and then you can see the recommendations designed specifically for your context. You can also download those recommendations and then use the scenario building training for designing the implementation pathway for your organization, also in the US context. Mm-hmm.
I got another one, which I basically replied by writing because it was from, if you remember, the lady who joined a little bit earlier, Gabriela. She was asking us to send her the recording of the webinar, which will be done not person by person, but we will upload it on the project YouTube channel. And there will be a link, of course, on the project website, so it will be made available, if not later today, then at least tomorrow, for everyone who would like to watch it. Inviting participants for any last questions or comments, if you have some. Even if not right now, perhaps some time is needed to process all this information that was delivered today, especially for the people that are new to the project. I would suggest to keep in touch with us through our social media channels. For example, the LinkedIn page of the project, it will remain open. We also use it as community communication channel. So Trust in Science do have a remaining communication channel. You can always address us. Also, you have the project email that will be monitored by the project coordinator as well as from us, so we can address any follow-up questions that you may have, even at a later stage. This project officially finished, but as you see, we continue to put efforts in implementing our mission and in delivering quality content. So do not be shy and keep in touch and reach out to us. We will be happy to address any questions or concerns. Okay, since one last check to see if there are any new questions. I don't see new questions for now. So as Agata proposed, we may slowly move to closing. Thank you once again for joining us today. And yeah, as we mentioned several times, keep in touch. We're here to support your efforts in fostering trust in science. Thank you. Have a nice day. Goodbye.